Hi, everyone. Welcome to this discussion around the theme of Together for the Planet, organized by the French Institute of Scotland in the context of the Night of Ideas. I'm Dr. Guillaume Latombe. I'm a lecturer in environmental change biology at the University of Edinburgh. And it is my pleasure and my privilege to be chairing this session tonight with three fantastic speakers. So we have Dr. Emma Woodham, who's a climate change program manager at the Glasgow Science Centre. Hi, Emma. We have Tessa, who's ambassador, coordinator, and trainer at the Global Ecovillage Network. Hello. And Emily Benson, who's director of engagement at the Green Economy Coalition. So, to start this discussion, I would like just to start with a brief summary of the state of the world in 2020. 2020 was a hard year for many people. I mean, because of the obvious, the pandemic of coronavirus, and recent research has actually suggests that it has impacted lower social class disproportionately, both health-wise and psychologically. But 2020 was unfortunately also the warmest year on record, according to NASA, tied with 2016. And some clearly visible effects of the increased temperature were the huge fires in Australia and California earlier in 2020. And in Australia alone, these fires are estimated to have cost the lives of more than 1 billion animals. And actually, in 2020, according to the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, 31 species have been declared extinct. For example, 3 species of frogs in Central America, and other populations are also declining. And now all populations of freshwater dolphins are considered to be threatened. So most people couldn't wait to see 2020 ending and hoping that 2021 will be better. Well, so far, it's not really. And that is because 2020 is not a special case and that came out of nowhere. 2020 is actually the result of years and actually decades of human actions. So we know the industrial revolutions. Increases in greenhouse gas emissions have led to huge increases in global temperatures. And biodiversity has also been declining at a steady rate since 1970, as shown by the Living Planet report published last year by the WWF, showing that on average, populations have been declining by 68% and reaching even 94% in Central and Southern America. The pressure on ecosystems is also linked to the emergence of infectious disease, especially because of zoonosis, that is the transmission of infectious disease from wildlife to the humans. And actually, we know very well the mechanisms through which the loss of biodiversity occurs. The 5 main pressures are climate change, so everything is linked, but also direct exploitation of the resources, land and sea use change, invasive alien species, that are species that have been transported and introduced into novel environments and can cause huge impacts to both biodiversity, but also human livelihood, and pollution. And in fact, these mechanisms are so well known that in 2010, during the COP10 in Nagoya, in the Aichi Prefecture, Japan, 20 targets had been set up to be met by 2020 to stop and even inverse the loss of biodiversity, so-called the Aichi targets. Now in 2021, none of these targets have actually been met. So I don't want to end up this opening on a too depressing note. looks a bit depressing at that, said like that, but it's important to realize that human efforts are not useless. They are just insufficient at that stage. And actually, amongst these 20 targets, there had been some progress on many of them, say between 2010 and 2020. But also, in 2020, Africa has been declared completely free of white polio since, thanks to ambitious campaigns of vaccination. From a biodiversity perspective, many populations are actually recovering. The European bison population is now over 6,000 individuals, when it was less than 2,000 in 2003. And actually, populations are even planned to be reintroduced in the UK in 2022. On the other side of the world, Tasmanian devils have been reintroduced for the first time since their extinction on the Australian mainland, with potential impacts by controlling alien species populations of feral cats. And according to the experts, in a recent paper published in Conservation Letters, scientists estimate that up to 48 species of birds and mammals have avoided extinction thanks to ongoing conservation efforts. So these examples show you that your actions can be taken and can have effects to actually mitigate climate change and prevent further loss of biodiversity. And so, but what can individuals do to contribute to that? So that's what we will talk about tonight with our three speakers, and to try to explore a bit how individuals can take actions. So first, I will go to you, Emma. So you're Climate Change Program Manager at the Glasgow Science Centre. So could you please let us know a bit what you are doing in the center and how do you involve Scottish people in your activities?
Absolutely, thanks, Guillaume. That's a perfect sort of introduction to what we like to do at the Science Centre. So we've just got a couple of slides here that hopefully give a bit of an introduction to what we usually do and also what we're up to now, because they're quite different, which has been really challenging, but also lots of opportunities. So I'm currently the Climate Change Programme Manager at Glasgow Science Centre, which is a great role that I've began a year ago now as COP26 kind of came into our lives, which we'll touch on a little bit more maybe later on in the discussion. But we, at the Science Centre, we aim not to change what people know about science, but how they feel about it. And we want to create those meaningful experiences with science. And as I say in my tagline here, we're about empowering people through engagement with science, technology, engineering and maths. And those encounters are usually hands-on and they're usually face-to-face. And that's what we're kind of known and loved for. And we are all about bringing people together. We're kind of that giant connector between society, between researchers and different organisations, and that's what we love to do. So on an average day, pre-pandemic, a visit to the Science Centre would look a lot like this. So a lot of you may have come to visit us before. We sit on the south bank of the Clyde in Glasgow, and we're about to celebrate our 21st birthday. It's probably not going to be a really crazy celebration, unfortunately, this year, but we are a Millennium Project. So we have 3 floors of interactive exhibitions, so it's over 450 individual interactives that we have on the floors, as well as kind of a big array of events spaces on our ground floor. So we usually see about 450,000 people coming through our doors every year, but we also engage with a significant proportion of people outside the Science Centre with our on tour programme. And we also see 75,000 school pupils a year. So we're kind of both a visitor attraction, but also make it really relevant and engaging for people. The science behind climate change, but what they can read themselves. So just to finish up, just wanted to sort of touch on a bit of a story around our community presence. As I've mentioned, we really want to be an asset to our local communities. And unfortunately, the majority of communities in Glasgow sit within the lowest 20% ranking in the Scottish Index of Multiple Deprivation, which is the kind of general index that that's used to kind of cross the education sector and other sectors to understand the challenges that some communities are facing. So it's really important for us to get out to communities and listen to them. We want to be relevant to them. That's where we start. And we go on a journey with families and adult learners, particularly, for example, those who are learning English as another language, or women's groups, or disability groups as well, and consult with them and understand what they need and what they're looking for. And I just want to point out, a lot of people know this, climate change is really of interest to these communities. It's not about telling them that climate change is happening. A lot of them understand this, and they're not that, you know, they're not hard to reach, as some people say in some ways, and they're not disengaged either, which I know a lot of you will know, but that's kind of a misconception really from talking to community groups. So an example of one of the learning modules that we run with community groups is our local and global connections course, where our community learning development team go out into communities, and we use maps, loads of different types of maps, to explore countries around the world, understand food production, seasonal produce, and look at the current affairs, human geography, and looks at climate. Some lovely images of some of the community making three-dimensional maps, which is, I guess, just to sort of finish up on that topic, you know, with community groups, we want to empower community groups, their capacity, so that they can create change, to connect them to that wider world, so they have the resources and the power to create change in their own life. So I'll hand back to you, Guillaume.
Thanks, Emma. That's wonderful. So, do you feel, as a just a follow-up question, I guess, and Tessa and Emily, of course, like, feel free to also like give your perspective on that. But you were mentioning about tech, and that's true. Like, we often talk about how new technology can be used to help people, like to contribute, or maybe like adapt to climate change. But you raise an interesting point, that not everyone has access to this technology. So I don't know, like, do you think like there is what's the stage at the moment? Do you think like there should be more access to this new technology? And even like, I'm thinking like in terms of city, for example, in science, we have these citizen science initiatives and things like that, but they all require phone, internet access, and things like this. And do you think that can be like a hindrance in this kind of approach?
Yeah, it's a really good point. I'll touch on that, and then I'll pass on in case the other panelists have anything to say. But yeah, of course, we're all aware that the pandemic has it's just opened up this huge cavern, or at least it's made more apparent this huge cavern, this disparities in access to digital technologies. So I think there is an elephant in the room for us just now, when, you know, we're being asked to make sure we're reaching underserved audiences, because there's a lot to do before that can happen. I think there are some points in that a lot of community groups are online, so there is still, I mean, there's no point in drawing a line under it and saying, you know, that's not possible. It is. You have to be creative to listen to the community group about what they need. But yes, when you ask them, they prefer face-to-face interactions. That's what they want. So it's really difficult to find that middle ground. And the way that we're trying to find that middle ground is logging on, and there's a lot of time and energy that you need to put in. This has to be a very, you have to respect the community and give them some support. And we log on, we'll do kind of sessions that will give them a guide of our digital resources. And it's just starting from those basic, you know, starting points and building. It's going to be a long process, but I think it's just trying to be positive and look for other options, and not say that it's too much, it's too difficult, you know.
All right. So talking about like meeting each other, maybe I can like move towards you, Tessa. So as ambassador coordinator and trainer for the Global Ecovillage Network. So you work also at the community level,
yes,
right? And so, I mean, what's your take on this face-to-face versus technology? And maybe you may want to start presenting what the Global Ecological Network is about.
What I can say, what I've noticed is the power of community, of course. And if someone doesn't have something in your community, other people step in and provide that. So we've actually seen a major uptake in our courses from all our regions in people attending events, because now they can actually access it. Whereas as before, they didn't have the means to travel or the money to pay for accommodation and all of that. But now they're being able to access more education, which is actually fantastic. So it's actually spreading our learnings a lot further. So I can go into my presentation. And yes. So I work for the Global Ecovillage Network, and we catalyze communities for area of the world. And we are seeing, oh, I'm sorry, my computer's just frozen. Let me try that again. So we're seeing that the power of community will change in the environment and be positive change. Here we go, especially with ration. And we can see is doing a fantastic job at mentioned landscapes. Sorry, my computer's not working. And Oroville, largely like one of our largest amazing ecosystem restoration, and Sekem in Egypt. A desert is now an oasis. So that action of community and people coming together to make change really matters to them. And we're also seeing this in terms of technology, which we were just talking about, the power of innovation that we're seeing in Ecovillage. So here in Tamara, they've created a polytunnel, and not only does it allow them to harvest food they wouldn't normally have been able to due to their climate. Also on the top right here is their solar power array. So they're using renewable energy at the same time as being grown food. But for us, we understand that it's not just about technology, it's also, we include all the different dimensions of regeneration. And that is including economy and culture. And this is how we gather to make change. We can't just look at ecology an isolated issue. The power of community is also participatory. It's not a government coming and saying, oh, you need to make these changes. And it's not sometimes a property developer saying it's an eco-village. It needs to come from this, needs to come from. It needs to have community ownership in order to be effective. So we need to honor that really bring us together and help us celebrate people, because that's going to give us the energy to start creating these solutions and support everyone through that also really helps us to feel able to interact. So here in Village in Norway, they focus quite strongly on community-owned cafe, and in that way they supported. Some focus really strongly on the social and in creating housing that includes all generations. Everyone can be supported. So we really like to focus on also the scales and levels of change that we, everything from the individual and your personal projects to the schools. We have a schools program as well, eco-villages, eco-neighborhoods, eco-cities, perhaps even to regions, and bioking change. I know this will come up later, but we are doing an Ecovillage twinning project, and this is where we teachers across the world, with 20, we managed to support and also support 16 eco-villages. which is really, really amazing. From we teamed up an Indian village with an Israeli eco-village, and also one from Australia who were paired with Greece, and they normally share a topic, so they can share their ideas and innovations across cultures. And it might be something on farming, we're seeing eco-villages working on and also education. So we've done extensive research, of course, on eco-villages and the positive impacts that they can have creating change. And we're looking especially at the SDGs, everyone's Gs, like what markers are you working on? How? So we've created on this, and we're creating a new thing called the Ecovillage Impact Assessment, which will be our eco-villages can actually their indicators and see how. And so far, this is the incredible impact that they're ecologically, and we see the social as well. So this enables us to governments and bigger. This is the tangible impact that we're having. This is what villages can do across all these different levels. But all of this can't just isolation in the communities. Of course, we need to talk to the governments. We need to talk to people coming, the policymakers are coming, speaking at Davos, which we do, and CCC, and so Jen, our organization, have consultative status with the UN Eco, also with the UNFCCC, and with, so we make sure that we are trying to affect policy level as well, to change everything from all the levels, to recognize the importance of their work socially, logically, and we'd love for people to sign up to the newsletter and keep in touch. Also support our work at the COP26, which hopefully will be happening in Glasgow this year.
Thanks, Tessa. Okay, maybe you can, yeah, perfect. Thanks, that's fascinating. One aspect, actually, I find a lot of other points very, very fascinating, but one especially is how you transit, like you talk about like acting at the local level, so within communities, but you also pair communities together. Yes. So how does this work? Like, does it? So there are two, how do you say, like two systems of control, like this bottom from the people at the community level, but then do you also require some global organization to pair these villages together, or do these also occur more organically and naturally?
So we reach out to over 6,000 communities worldwide, and we have, I think I just heard today, 35,000 people who are subscribed to our newsletter. So we generally just put out a call and just say, we're opening up the new twinning year, please apply. And then we go through all the applications, we look for similarities, and it's almost like a dating service, and we see who fits who, and we specially pair them and see if they're willing, and if they're willing, then we take them through and fund that project for them, yeah.
Okay, and how big is one community or one eco-village in general?
We define an eco-village of at least 25 people, and they should be running for at least 2 years.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, but we have some communities with over 6,000 people.
Okay, so yeah, so that actually leads to my next question, I guess, is so do you think this model can be scaled up at a larger scale? Like basically, could the world work as just a collection of eco-villages, or is it more complementary to like big cities, you know, like for example?
Of course, there's communities and systems within everything. It's just how they're coming together and what systems they have to do that. So we have our urban eco-village project, which helps to bring, you know, an urban context together. But, you know, it's a network of networks, and how do they connect, and what goals and values do they share? So in our work in China, they are focusing on eco-regions. So it's a whole collective of eco villages that have similar values, that they're all wanting to work together for people, the planet, and then coming together to create an entire eco region, which is quite amazing.
So that's kind of a nested the system basically, with these from a small scale together to create a bigger one.
Yes.
Cool. And you mentioned a bit of economy, and I'm of course going to use this to make this transition. But first, how does economic system work in eco-villages?
Of course, like people, every eco-village is completely different, and they will focus on different things. Damanhur Ecovillage in Italy, for example, have created their entire own currency that's separate from the rest of Italy. And here in my Ecovillage in Scotland, we have what is called ecos, and they're equivalent to the pound, so 1 eco for £1. And it just enables us to keep the money within the community and to make sure that we are supporting each other. And it's also a way to invest in community projects as well. In my local area, we also have a let's, where people actually use time and service in place of money. So there's so many different ways that people can do it.
Great. And before I switch to Emily to actually bounce on that, because I think it was perfect, but so your eco-village in Scotland, could you maybe tell us where it is, and is it eventually possible to go and visit? Obviously not at the moment, but once everything becomes a bit more closer to what it was.
Certainly, yes. We are based in northeast Scotland in Moray on the coast. It's a really beautiful eco-village. We're around 350, 400 people. And we have a foundation which provides educational courses. And we have eco houses. We have great examples of eco-village technology, our community farming, our community cooking. We have wind turbines. We have a lot to come and see. So it's a great place for inspiration. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Can't wait to go and visit and see what.
Please do when we're all allowed.
All right. So on that note, Emily, I'm obviously and logically going to switch to you as the director of engagement for the Green Economy Coalition. So Tessa just explained to us a bit how you have these different alternative economic systems but they work a bit locally, it seems. So now we know we know how our economy works, maybe not in details, but globally. So can you maybe give us a bit more details on that, and what are possible alternatives, and what you are doing at the Green Economy Coalition?
Well, thanks so much, Guillaume, and really, I loved both of those presentations. And I suppose what it does is really remind you of this kind of rising tide of eco and a sort of consciousness of our relationship to the natural world is beginning to feel a lot more important and a lot more pervasive. However, obviously, because I work at quite a big level, I work at the sort of global level, we have to be honest that although there are these wonderful islands of conservation and eco activity, and those islands are getting bigger, they are still small islands of green within a brown economic system. And a lot of the sort of brown economic rules of the game are kind of stacked against nature. I work for something called the Green Economy Coalition, and what we're trying to do is ensure that we look at the economics as well. So I just thought I'd actually kind of kick off with a couple of questions first, if I could see anyone. But firstly, I'd ask you, how many of you kind of enjoy stories? And at this point, I think everybody's hand would go up, right? We all love stories. It doesn't matter what kind of stories. We love stories. Humans love stories. How many of you are interested in economics? Now, I'm guessing all of your hands would go down, right? Most of you, right? I feel the same, or I felt the same. But actually, what I'm going to do today is actually make the case that stories are very, very powerful. Stories, and by stories I mean anything from the stories that we tell each other, to the news stories, to what we talk about down the pub. We're talking about the stories that make up the fabric of public life. And that's what makes narrative. And narrative is the bedrock of policy. So I'm going to talk about stories, and I'm going to talk about how we create better stories, and how better stories creates new economics, and how new economics is how we fix the planet. So let me first kick off with a little bit of information about who we are. So we were just hearing Emma talk about COP26, which is very exciting. I'm going to roll back time a little bit and take you back to COP15 in Copenhagen, which was in 2009, so a long time ago now, actually. And I was there. It was bitterly, bitterly cold. And the Danish government had been working for a long, long time to get governments to agree on a more ambitious climate agenda. And you know, all the big guns were there. Obama was there, and Gordon Brown was there, and every EU member government was there. And for those of you who weren't there, it failed dismally. Governments couldn't agree. They couldn't come out with a deal. Now, there are lots of reasons as to why that happened, and you can't distill it down to one reason. But if I had to, if you really look at it, what was really at the core of the thing was the idea that by cutting carbon, governments would be hurting their economies. Okay, so taking action on the environment was going to hurt our economies. When in fact, we know that our economies depend on nature. They're not separate from nature. We can't continue to exploit nature and continue to grow. Our economies are nested within the natural world. And it's this myth that our economies are somehow independent of nature that is actually the root cause of the problem. It's this myth of separation that makes irrational policy look quite rational. It's how we decide that we can subsidize fossil fuels to a tune of about 5 trillion a year. It makes the idea that we can rely on GDP as a holistic measure of progress when it only measures productivity, which means that the more guns you sell, the more forests you burn, our GDP goes up. But it tells us, as Kennedy would remind us, it tells us nothing about everything that makes life important, our health and our well-being. And it also makes the idea that nature's services are valued at really close to zero. All of the many services that nature provides, our pollination, our water systems, our biodiversity, a lot of it is valued at close to zero in our economic system. So our economies are not currently capable of protecting nature at scale. And that's quite a sobering thought. And that's what COP15 really showed to a lot of the conservation community, and a lot of the poverty community as well, and a lot of labour groups as well. So we said we've got to be able to come together to see whether we can change these myths on which our economic systems are based. But really, I mean, can we change our economies? No, of course we can't. Of course we can't. Or can we? So the Green Economy Coalition formed from COP15, and it brings together a huge array of different organizations, from conservation and environmental organizations to development and poverty organizations, to labor groups, to international institutions, to a bit of business as well. And we set out to see, okay, how could we How could we start to change the economic system? Is that even possible? So we started off with a series of dialogues, green economy dialogues in a series of different countries all around the world. And they were led by national partners, and they worked with national institutions. And they started to explore, what does an economic system that could regenerate nature, that could also bring about well-being, what could that look like, and how would we do it? And bringing loads of different stakeholders together and lots of different perspectives, they began to etch out what it would mean in an India context, or in a South Africa context, or a Peruvian context. And these began to grow, the dialogues. And what was fascinating about what became clear was that we were seeing the same themes come out from a lot of these dialogues as to what an economic system had to do. So that's just this is just showing sort of what our process kind of looked like. So sort of mass stakeholder issue groups, big resonance testing, and then towards policy action. But the 5 themes that came out above everything else, at time and time again, was these 5. Was that a new economic system had to value nature better. It had to ensure that it was adequately represented and valued properly. It had to be one that tackled inequality and went straight to ensured people's well-being. It had to green economic sectors and provide a space for innovation, particularly the big sectors, our agriculture and our housing and our infrastructure. It had to tackle financial system reform, and it had to measure and govern things differently. And through these dialogues, then, and beginning to realize what these common themes were, the coalition has continued to grow and grow and grow. And each of our members are rooted in national conversations, and each of them have embarked on their own policy process to re-examine how to define policies that meet these goals. So now I'm just going to go back to stories. What we've seen through the work that we've done so far is the huge power of moving from harmful stories about our economy, which is firstly that we're separate to nature, or that productivity alone is success, towards good stories, we are nature, and well-being is success. So as I come to the end, I guess, what can you do? Well, if policy is your interest, if what you're interested in is policy, then we've tracked a bunch of countries against those 5 themes to see whether they had to what extent they have embarked on a green economic transition. And you can check those out in the Green Economy Tracker. You can go and see how well 20 countries are doing, and we're about to track another 20. You can hold your government to account. Or if you're more interested in the stories aspect, then you can join us in starting to change the story of our economy from one of separation to one of interconnection, from one of productivity to well-being. And there's another link there. So I'm just going to stop there. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot, Emily. Fascinating. So from there, actually, you tackle like a subject that's quite dear to me. Like, although like come from a scientific background, and even like actually hard science, more mathematical and physical before switching to ecology a bit later on. But I'm more and more interested in the concept of values, and how do we value different parts of nature, which is often considered separately from science. And so there are 2 questions there that come to my mind. Like, so one, we have a diversity of values. And actually, Tessa, you probably can chip in on that, like about how different eco-villages like may put different values on different elements of the ecosystems. But maybe first, just to get this out of the way, like so do we need to put a monetary value on everything, or are some things like incommensurable? Or does if we put economic value on everything, then there are things that become more valuable as they become more rare, and then you end up having like that can turn out to be detrimental. So I don't know, what are your views? And Tessa, and even Emma, like in your talks with the different communities, I don't know, like if you have this kind of, if you approach this kind of question, I'm not sure like which one of you want to start answering that. Emily, maybe.
I mean, I'm happy to take a punt at the economic value. So huge topic. You know, can one put an economic value on a bullfrog or a wetland system, and should you? I guess I sort of revert back to the descriptor. So you know, a seminal figure in this space, who's Partha Descriptor, who's running a big review of biodiversity at the moment. And he says, listen, the first point is that if we don't value these things, if we put no economic value on these things, then they have close to zero in what we think is important. So what does that tell us? So I think we have to be honest about that. And then the second thing is that there are numerous ways by which we do value. I mean, if we look at a kind of if we look at Stonehenge is worth so much more to the UK than a set of stones, and it's worth so much more to the UK than a tourist revenue. It is something deeply intrinsic to who we are as a country. And I feel that as we start to understand our dependency on nature, all of these multiple different values, our spiritual values, our cultural values, our social values, start to get represented in what we ascribe economic value to. But should everything have a price tag? No, absolutely not. Number one. And number two, does that necessarily mean that everything can be exchanged and traded? Absolutely not. We put hard rings around what we care and need.
We can see that by the way that communities are stepping up now for the rights of nature. A lot in our Latin American region, they are standing up for mother rights, like the rights of Mother Nature and earth rights. It's quite a strong movement there. And we've seen, I think, in the press in New Zealand, they've given rights to their mountain as being an individual being. And you may not do anything to that mountain because it has the rights of a human being. And I think that's a beautiful way to respect and to value things. But of course, when we have this global economy, how do those two systems meet and intersect and share value across? I think that's a big question.
And just to chip in on that, actually, so the IBES, the International Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, also now implementing the Nature Futures initiative, and actually works with as a triangle with 3 points, and one being the intrinsic value, one being the utility value, so ecosystem services, and then the connection values through cultural aspects of nature. So it's good to see that it seems like to be like really this movement going there. Okay, we have actually a question from our audience. So especially since we don't have that much time left, I'm going to ask it now. So this question is, the Blue Carbon Initiative tries to work on this idea of giving value to natural resources. Mangroves and kelp in the ocean help store carbon. But the model is still the same capitalistic approach and government discussed during COP25 about how they can give value to the seashores so they can negotiate their right to pollute and release more carbon. So how can we change this way of thinking? Maybe Emily, I mean, that's might be like a question for you. So maybe you kind of answered part of it, saying like you can't really put a price tag on everything, but if you don't, then the value is close to zero. So you have like a conundrum there.
And I think, I mean, I am a very strong, I think the economic transition and starting to ascribe higher values to nature is dependent on the communities who live in those areas having a right and a say over that local value system, as it were. And when fishermen or local communities actually have rights over their natural resources, their natural capital, then what you find is that it doesn't become so quickly disconnected into sort of foreign ownership or foreign direct investment. So for me, the real key is ensuring community rights and community ownership over your local resources in order to ensure that it doesn't go into the hands of others who are just making capital off natural capital.
And I think that's kind of linked a bit towards also how, we avoid something so-called the tragedy of the commons, when we have a common resource, and if everyone is trying to just make their own benefits, this resource is going to be completely depleted. But then you had especially the work of Elinor Ostrom's and with her 8 design principles, who got a Nobel Prize for her work, and showing how you have like these 8 points, including like proportional response to someone who goes astray from the model, but it also works at the community level. So it seems that there is a theme about this kind of decentralization here that is necessary to give values, which is what actually was also transparent, I feel, in Tessa's talk, of course, but also Emma talking about communities. Very interesting new questions actually, which is, would culture and art have a role to play? And either by bringing people together or broadcasting the stories that will help us developing the new narrative that we are looking for. And I will let one of you answer that, but I want to say that there is actually one of the session during the Night of Ideas, like with artists. So I think it was yesterday, but so I encourage you to go watch this discussion again once it's available on Facebook. But yeah, does any of you want to answer this question?
I'm happy to come in on that, Guillaume.
Go ahead.
Somebody might say, the Science Centre, are they going to come in on art? The answer is yes. We are very excited about communicating and engaging people with STEM through the arts, and it's going to be it's a key medium and will continue to be. And I think particularly for community groups, going back to the point I was making about making things really relevant to people, I think that's art's obviously an incredible way of connecting people and speaking all those languages. And I guess on the point of bringing people together and broadcasting those stories, I think a key part for us in the climate change story over the next few months is really to bridge global north and south through art. And that's a really key piece for us. And we're really keen to have that kind of lived experience told by not only local communities here in Glasgow, but touching on the South communities in South America and those incredible stories and that relationship that those communities have. I think there's so much shared experience, I think, between these communities who are going to be the first to experience and are the first to experience the effects of climate change. So it's a key piece for us to bridge those communities, north and south, and art's very much a way of doing that, including storytelling. And to bring in COP26, there's often a key role in terms of Indigenous communities in that story, which we really look to capitalise on and to engage the Scottish community with, as well as a kind of legacy piece from the COP.
No, yeah, I completely agree with that. And that's why, like, yeah, as I was mentioning earlier, this cultural aspect is becoming more and more included in the frameworks that we see today. Tessa, so I mean, I would suspect in eco-villages, like the cultural aspect is quite important. And especially actually that makes me think about when you pair the eco-villages together, how does this do you see culture may like mostly being used as a positive, like as enhancing the exchange, or sometimes can it be maybe a hindrance if there are cultural differences between different places? And if that happens, how do you solve this kind of issue?
Wow. Of course, it's both. You can't have two cultures meeting and not having this dynamic of both collaboration and points on which they both care about, but also pain points. So there's definitely a lot there, and there's a lot of generational and collective trauma that a lot of our communities experience, that they have to work through these processes as well. But yeah, we hope through the support that we're able to provide that they have access to tools and education which helps them to really make a positive change around this. And certainly a lot of the change comes through the expression of their cultural celebrations, and they've been able to share, like, this is our celebration, and try and get the other people involved and share that across. And that's one way we connect, because we're all human, right? We all need to feel inside. We all have these emotions. We all have these dreams where we can live a beautiful life. So I think that's our point of connection. It's, from within, and our art and our vision helps to express that. Yes, it's crucially important. And I love this question around storytelling. It's just so beautiful. And I think it's Dr. Demartini who says the amount of change that we make is directly proportional to the clarity of our vision. So where are we visioning? Where are we creating this dream? Where are we creating these beautiful stories that we want to create, and taking collective ownership of these stories and visions? And that's in community. And that's in these spaces where art and sharing of art can take place. Yeah.
Great. All right. So we're close to the end of our session. I mean, I think this discussion could go on and on for quite a long time, but we're going to need to wrap up, unfortunately. Although I would encourage anyone watching this live stream, or even watching the video later on, to please be in touch with anyone. You have all the information about how to reach anyone from the webpage of the French Institute in Scotland. But so to conclude, I would actually I would like to conclude with a very important event that will occur, like in Scotland in November. I mean, fingers crossed at this stage, and that's the COP26 in Glasgow. So we mentioned the COP, the conference of the parties, like several times, like the Aichi one and then the Copenhagen one. And this year it's going to be in Glasgow from the 1st to the 12th of November, and so the COP is of course when the parties of the United Nations make the big decisions and so on. And but how can we like contribute to that? And what are the initiatives that you are developing? Some initiatives around that. So maybe you can give us a bit more details about that. And I think so. Emma, you have some activities going on.
Thanks, Guillaume. Yeah, I'm happy to just sort of touch on very briefly our kind of relationship with COP26. So please feel free to log on to our website and have a look at the Our World, Our Impact programme. That's really about kind of preparing everybody for the COP. We're very keen that COP26 happens with people and not to them. So that's kind of what we're focused on in our programme. Is around 5 themes. You can see the bottom left, quite pertinent to our conversation in balancing the economy and well-being and the planet. So we're really keen to make sure that we can use the COP as a springboard to inform, inspire and empower, and as we've been touching on, really to co-create content with underserved communities to match their needs. And I think we're probably all convinced that we need to secure a really big legacy from this event in Scotland, but beyond as well. And that's something that we're really focused on as well. So it's just to sort of finish up on our role formally in the COP. So this is the Science Centre from a different angle. You can see just our neighbours over the way. We have the BBC opposite us, but on the other side is the Scottish Events Campus, which will be doubled in size to host COP26. So we are working closely with the UK government to host the Green Zone. Anybody who's not down with the technical lingo of the COP, of which there is an absolute mountain, the Green Zone is the public engagement area, so anybody should be able to register and attend any of the events within the Green Zone. So I just wanted to point out that there is a portal that's opened last week from the Cabinet Office to submit ideas to get involved in the COP. So there's a very catchy link there. I think if you Google EU, if you Google COP26 Get Involved or Events Cloud COP26, you'll be able to find the portal. There's also a link from the COP26 site. And that's opportunities for the Green Zone, also for the UK Pavilion within the Blue Zone, which is where the delegates are and where all the negotiations happen, and also a couple of other zones within the Blue area. So it's to cover both of those zones. So if you are looking to get involved, there's spaces, for example, our IMAX Cinema, our planetarium, and the conversations around what will happen in that space are ongoing. So please have a look and apply if you're interested in showcasing your work or looking for a space.
Thanks, Emma. And so Global Ecovillage Network, you also have something going on?
Yes, so the COP25 was very successful for us. We managed to sign 6 MOUs with African governments to implement our Ecovillage development program.
So sorry, what are MOUs?
Memorandums of understanding. So okay. It's basically the governments signing their interest in taking part in these programs, whereby we assist the governments to transition traditional villages to eco-villages. And Senegal, for example, have created, I think, the world's first national eco-village agency, which is amazing. And their goal is to transition 14,000 traditional villages to eco-villages. So we have a very big impact on the ground, and COP really helps us to do this. We've signed with 6 African governments, and we had 2 more signings at previous COP meetings as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so we're hoping for COP26 to be able to continue our presence at the COP meetings in order to sign more MOUs, develop strategic partnerships, influence more policies, be a voice for eco-villages. You know, the people, you know, need to say like what's happening, and these governments need to hear that from the people, and allows us to create action on the ground. So as a charity, we're looking for support, especially financial support, to be able to attend the COPs. And so we are really looking forward to be able to make this change. And we would gladly accept your support in helping us to be able to do that.
Thanks.
Yes, and do sign up to the newsletter as well.
We will. And maybe Emily, if you have some last comments about that?
We will, all of our members, a lot of members will be there. We're really excited about it being in the UK. I guess our big push is really the green recovery from this global pandemic and the opportunities that this offers. Like the end of the Second World War, this is a moment for huge change. So let's not waste a good crisis, and let's start to put our economic systems onto a better path.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, so this will be the end of this session. So I thank you all, the three of you, for fantastic points. It's very interesting. And thank you to everyone watching this either live or in the future. And I hope you found this inspiring. I found it for sure, that's for sure. And once again, please feel free to get in touch with any of the speakers from tonight if you have more questions and if you want to be involved. I think like it's quite clear now that sometimes we can feel a bit lost in face of in front of this big machine and this big system, but it starts at the community level, and there are ways to actually scale it up at a more macro level, and especially thanks to such great initiative. So thank you, everyone, and have a good evening. And yeah, we're going to close it now. Bye.